Our Father, today we invite your presence. Guide and direct our thoughts, our words. Press back the forces of evil that would interfere. We know that this subject is one that can cost us life eternal, should we choose the wrong God. And the deception is so great that earnest saints oftentimes find themselves having been deceived. Help us be clear in this issue. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, the subject of hypnosis is not one that usually you need to be concerned with. The Adventist Church at large, the word hypnosis, they choose not to have anything to do with it. At least that used to be. The problem is how that particular practice can be done under different names. And there's where we get deception. But let me take you with a journey that I went through. Oops. Back up here a bit. Something got blended the wrong place. One day I was at home and I got a call from the emergency room. An individual had asked for me as the physician. Patient had been at the lake motorbiking, was in the water, and another motorboat came by and the prop got her through the thigh. Horrible wound. And she was in the emergency room. The bleeding had been controlled by this time. And I came and I took a look where the whole thigh was laid open. And there I was, of course, worried about certain nerves, and by this time the vessels we had controlled, but if you have some of those major nerves, may need to be sutured back together and under specialist care. I ordinarily did most of my own surgery, but I thought today I'm going to ask a plastic surgeon to come help me on this case. And so we went to surgery. And was able to put the wound back together. No major nerve or vessel had been injured. Amazing. Because a pretty bad situation otherwise. And though the patient had a huge incision or where it had been sewed up, it was bandaged, and 3 days later we were going to change the dressing. And at a particular time I was to meet the plastic surgeon in the room. He evidently got there a little earlier than I did. And when I came into the room, he was changing the dressing, had the leg up in the air, and the patient was laying there just sleeping nice. No discomfort. And usually a huge wound like that, you change and pull the bandage off, you know it's stuck to the wound and there's a lot of discomfort on there, but the patient was just resting. And so I said something to the patient, and he says, she's sleeping, but he says, I'll wake her up in a bed. And when he finished and wrapped up the leg with a new bandage, then he counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the patient on 2 and 3 began to stir, and on 0, she was wide awake, and it's all done. Boy, what a beautiful procedure. I had no clue that this surgeon practiced hypnosis. This is what had happened. And I said, boy, after this, I'll make sure that this doesn't happen. Ordinarily with patients, if something like this, I would tell them my understanding and my belief, they could choose what they would want to do. It was their final choice, but I would share. And most people had the same belief I did on these things. But this patient felt so good and the doctor was happy. Well, why should I complain if something was done that was painful and without pain? Well, I, of course, had a different background in my life and my understanding than this plastic surgeon did. What is hypnosis? Well, the definition says it's an induced state of mind in which the subject is responsive to suggestions of the hypnotist. The state may be to the degree resembling sleep, called a hypnotic trance. There's about 30 different levels of hypnosis when I looked up a particular text on this. And Where did hypnosis come from? Satan tempted the first Adam in Eden, and Adam reasoned with the enemy, thus giving him the advantage. Satan exercised his power of hypnotism over Adam and Eve, and this power he strove to exercise over Christ. But after the word of Scripture was quoted, Satan knew that he had no chance of triumphing. Now, hypnotism goes back centuries and centuries, and it had been used in the medical establishment at various times, and then it would go out of vogue and come back in. But most societies have had access to this. Going back in Europe about the 16th century and the 1500s, and then into the 17th, it was used considerably there. And it was, the explanation for it is that it had magnetism. It was some sort of power like the magnets would have. We have these pieces of iron where they will come together or expel each other. We can't see the power that's doing this. It's there. We know it's there. It's real, but can't explain it. And so that made that type of thing easy to begin to attempt to explain some of these other things. And the physicians would use magnetism idea to explain their hypnosis. Let's go to Swedenborg again. He lived from 1688 to 1772. And he tied magnetism to his theories to the spiritual world in a manner that laid the grounds for spiritualism. Along comes a Dr. Mesner. He graduated from medical school in Vienna in the late 1700s. And he had the concept, believed in the things we have been presenting, this great power of the universe, chi, 100 other names. And he believed in magnetism as being a healer. And so as he set up his practice, he began to use magnets on people as an attempt to heal. And then he came across a Catholic priest that was healing with his hands, didn't need the magnets. Oh, so Mesner says, well, maybe I can do that too. So then he began to use simply his hands and dispensed with the magnets. But still this magnetic energy was being explained supposedly for these healings. Eventually, Mesner didn't need his hands, he could just do it orally as time came along. And so hypnotism became known as mesmerism. Franz Anton Mesner from 1733 to 1815. And in 1766, he got his degree from Vienna, and he was a believer in astrology. All of this was based in astrology. He wrote that book, and a universal magnetic fluid, he believed, was bringing the cures that he felt he was getting. Mesmer was a believer in astrology, felt that the body of a man was a microcosm of the macrocosm. We've talked about that previously. He felt that man, earth, and the universe were tied together with a universal magnetic fluid. And Mesmer continued his medical practice using magnets to pass over the bodies for a cure. And so we talked about that Swabian priest. In 1784, a book was written by a French doctor, Jean-Philippe François Deleuze, who was a spiritualist. And he called this same phenomena animal magnetism. So hypnotism became animal magnetism. And you'll find in the Spirit of Prophecy oftentimes that expression, animal magnetism. In her earlier writings, later years, that term wasn't so much used. And so this was a term when they would have hypnotism and have these go into a trance, people would have clairvoyance, or supposed to be able to get messages or see things and understand that others couldn't. All of this got mixed up together in a psychic phenomena. Mesmer believed that the microcosm reflects the macrocosm. And we've covered there. So we look here. He invented a tub that they had iron rods down into it, and you'd come along and hang on to the rods, and there would be electrical current as a battery, basically a battery, and people, to get their therapies, would come and get this electrical current therapies. That was one form. Then one of his pupils developed this, according to medical history book says, developed the Ouija board. And they said instead of a chi force, it was the odic force. Same imaginary force, but just different terms to describe it. So we see the movement of this concept of this power out in the universe that could be manipulated by man in healing and different types of practitioners. We look at a picture of the Ouija board. Now, I don't have to talk about that. You all are well aware that we avoid using the Ouija boards. But today, it has come in with a picture of an angel painted on it, and it's known as an angel board. Oh, no. And this, I understand, has been moving through some of the Protestant churches fairly rapidly. And there's the picture on the Ouija board. They put your hands on there, and what you do in divination, you can ask any question of the universe and get a yes or no answer. But a Ouija board had numbers and letters of the alphabet. It could spell out things. It could give you numbers. And so it was a little more advanced than a pendulum that simply would say yes or no according to questions. Same power, same thing. Behind it, of course, demonic power. Mesmer's hypnosis and medicine. Remember we mentioned he used the magnets and then the magnetic tubs and then the passing of the body, hands over the body, no hands. People would go to a trance state. They could do surgery under hypnosis. There's, in the medical textbook, it talks about a couple English doctors that were down in India, and they did like 160 some surgeries with no pain problems, strictly under hypnosis. They came back to England or Scotland and attempted it, and it didn't work so good there, because remember, you got to have the individual as well as the one doing the hypnosis be in unison for it to really work. And when they went to where the people weren't in their mindset dealt into that, didn't work out too well. Now, when I mentioned the other day that when the reporters came back from China in 1971, they were talking about surgery being done in China. And that was just a little bit here and there. It really wasn't across the country that it was happening. But they could have a surgery, operating the chest open, patients there wide awake eating an apple. But I heard that, to my mind, it was hypnotism. What else could it be? And that did turn out, in time, that is what it was. But people, it created. Now I'm going to skip that, it's hard to read. I'm going to read this one from Ministry of Healing. The theory of mind controlling mind was originated by Satan to introduce himself as the chief worker, to put human philosophy where divine philosophy should be. Of all of the errors that are finding acceptance among professedly Christian people, none is more dangerous deception, none more certain to separate man from God than this. Innocent though it may appear, if exercised upon patients, it will tend to their destruction, not to their restoration. It opens a door through which Satan will enter to take possession, both of the mind that is given up to be controlled by another, and of the mind that controls. There are a variety of things that occur that really fall under hypnosis. Ellen White says all of Satan's deceptions and of healing techniques at the end of time will be done through the power that does hypnosis. So it doesn't matter what the physical things, whether they put needles in or they do all sorts of contortions, has nothing to do with that. It's when we give our will to allow this to happen, then that power can come and have dominion over us. The physical things have nothing to do with it. The devil hijacks good things. Massage. Try and go find a place, a masseur, that isn't combined with all of the other things. And this happened in the oils, and it happens in so many ways. And then people can't understand why I would say there's something to be avoided in these. But if you have to be discerning on that type of thing. Somehow this got mixed up. I need to change what we're doing. I wanted to go into, I think I'll do it without the computer. How many have heard about biofeedback? Okay. Now, the first thing we need to have clear when we're doing different types of monitoring in medicine, like if I wear an electrocardiograph machine for 24 hours, 48 hours, so forth, that is not biofeedback of what I'm talking about. It may be called that, and properly so. I'm talking about something different. If they do electrocardiograph or do an encephalograph brainwave in my chest, or of my muscles, electromyography, those are monitoring. I call them, I'm referring to those as monitoring. The words when I use biofeedback involves where there is a mind-altering practice first. There's a difference, because I've heard some doctors call biofeedback what I call monitoring. You had a question?
No, it's go to slide 52. It'll take you to biofeedback.
Okay. Somehow things got, I had them totally separate. I really got something.
Yeah, no, keep going. You get to biofeedback.
Okay, because I had a lot of confusion here because things weren't in the order they were supposed to be here. Okay, thank you. They're supposed to be two separate. This biofeedback, we want to talk about it. Way back, let me finish up. So if a person, a doctor wants to have you wear electrocardiograph or some type of monitoring thing, perfectly proper. Nothing wrong with it. It's measuring the electric activities within the body. But the term biofeedback that is now being used most often is referring to a different type of process. And I want to take you now back to where it started. And first we have here, it says, a method of consciously controlling the automatic part of the nervous system to affect changes in the body functions. Over in Germany, a German neurophysiologist back in the 1890s had a class of hypnosis and using hypnosis for mental therapy and so forth. And he found eventually that his patients were able to self-hypnotize. They were doing it without his presence or need. Then he died, and a Johannes Schultz, a neurologist, took over and followed through with what he had been doing. And he, in turn, changed the name of hypnosis now to auto-hypnosis. Same activities they were doing, but he called it auto-hypnosis. And then another physician carried the work on and came to the United States, Wolfgang Luth. He worked with Schultz, then he wrote about it, and he changed the name when he brought it to the United States to autogenic practice. Autogenic. So we dropped hypnosis, we dropped auto-hypnosis, we pick up the name, but the same procedure, same activity. Then in the 1950s, there was a Dr. Kamiya down in San Francisco, and he attached an electrocephalograph to a brain, doing the electronic testing, while they put them into trances. And he presented this at a symposium, and he named it biofeedback. But remember, the person had to do something that put themselves into a trance. And then he would get this biofeedback. He'd get the alpha, then the theta brainwave speeds. One of the MDs and the psychologist, also a PhD in physics, was in the audience. And this interested him, Elmer Green. So he then began to do research in the field of mind control and body control. He was very much interested in this biofeedback. And he developed the monitoring devices. So now they would have devices that would show the pulse rate, would show the temperature on the skin, the brainwave activity, and a variety of physical things that would be out on graphs as they were doing this. Now this really interested the medical profession, because now you got proof of what you're doing, something that bypassed that business of just hypnosis. And this became rather popular, and they could find, yeah, amazing the things that might get better, especially those things that had to do with the hands. Sometimes there are diseases where you get spasms of the little arteries in the fingers, and the hands turn white, and it can even cause loss of fingers in time on there. And these types of things would be improved, which we didn't have much good therapy for that other than to keep the hands warm all the time, and that sort of approach. So here this became an answer for some of the difficult problems. Autofeedback. And they called this biofeedback became the word, but for it to happen there has to be some change of the mind. So there is a mantra, there is a giving of the will, there is some breathing practice, just like if you were doing meditation. It's a mind-altering change. And if you read the book Beyond Biofeedback by Dr. Green, he is a deep believer in the Eastern religions. In fact, the reason he took a doctoral degree in physics is to try to be able to show that his beliefs in the Eastern religions and this chi and all of these things can be explained on a physical basis. So he wrote this book, and he became the famous one for promoting this biofeedback across the country in many different, and probably most physical therapy departments or offices will have a biofeedback for doing this type of therapy. But in it you have to have the mind-altering activity first to accomplish this. So we're looking at, again, hypnosis. It was hypnosis by name to start with. It was auto-hypnosis second. It was autogenic third. And fourth name is biofeedback. And so very few physicians have a clue of the history of it. And there are some of the machines. Let's go back to machines. They would picture of a person hooked up with all of these. They lay there and they practice this meditation type approach of altering the mind. And then they read these, and then they will make suggestions so the body begins to make corrections, and things do happen. Yes. How to do it? Muscle relaxation, deep rhythmic breathing, mantras, imaging and visualization, and giving the use of your will. In fact, there's a whole chapter in his book, and he calls it volition, the use of the will. And he's very adamant that it's the use and the control of this volition that is so important in this therapy. There's a picture of some gathering together and hooked up, and here's the guru there kind of guiding this session. I took this scanned it out of Dr. Green's book. And this partnership of mind and body biofeedback journal. And Dr. Green called it the yoga of the West. You had a question.
Yes, sir, Noyes. Have you heard of a man called Wim Hof?
I can't hear.
Wim Hof. Have you heard of a man named Wim Hof?
No.
He's a German, and supposedly he can control his body to the extent he can withstand extreme cold.
She's stating that there's a name of a gentleman that is supposed to be able to control his body in such a way that he can stand extreme control. This is not unusual. Some of the monks over in Tibet and so forth will go out and sit in a freezing, snowing area where they'll be covered with snow, spend all night, get up and they're nice and warm. And it's the same power. Same power. Mm-hmm. The dangerous science. I have spoken distinctly regarding the dangerous science which says that one person will give up his mind to the control of another. The science is of the devil's own. We're told that these variety of healing mechanisms will come into our country as in the field of science, which they are really religious. These are religious, but they will come under the guise of science, and it's happening. That's full blown. The end on that one. Give me a moment, and I'll want to come to another one here.
While you were doing that, you said that there were 4 steps. It went from hypnosis, auto-hypnosis.
Okay, yes. Hypnosis, auto-hypnosis, autogenic training to biofeedback. At least that's the information I obtained.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's go to homeopathy. I'm going to put another one on at the same time here. Crystals. Are you familiar with the term homeopathy?
Yes.
Would anybody share with us your understanding of the meaning of the term?
Is it like heals like?
Okay, so like, he's saying like will heal like. In a way, okay, over here.
It's taking a poisonous substance and diluting it down to the extent that it won't harm you.
Okay.
It's supposed to strengthen you.
All right.
somehow.
Partially correct. Yes.
Like, for instance, if you are dealing with allergies, say, you're allergic to cigarette smoke, what they will do is take an amount of nicotine and they will dilute it down and down and down and down, but you're still going to get that in your drops.
Okay. So we've had several different answers and partially true. Let's go ahead and see what we can learn here on there, because certainly you've been looking at this. The Encyclopedia of Homeopathy. Very interesting subject. We need to go back to the time of George Washington here. December 14. Let me check here. Things have somehow they've all mixed up inside. We'll go back with this story anyhow, whether it fits, and bring it out. So George Washington got a tremendous sore throat, pharyngitis. He called the doctors. And the first one came and he took copious amount of blood from his vessels. Withdrew 400 cc's. He bled twice more during the day, copious amount it said. Then he had 2 doses of calomel, mercury. And that would cause the bowels, when they take the calomel, it would cause the bowels to have diarrhea and to flush. Blisters were applied to his body. And how do you do that? You heat a glass vessel real hot, and then you put it on the body, and as it cools, it sucks and makes a huge blister, which fills with fluid. They're trying to balance the fluids in the body. And so they did that, applied to the front of his neck, and he received some enemas. Okay, then some consultants were called after he'd had all of this. The best in the land were called in. He was bled again. Another 900 cc's this time. He was given vapors of vinegar to breathe. Repeated doses of antimony to force vomiting. Got to balance these fluids in the body. Additional doses of mercury to increase the bowel action. Blisters to the legs now. And here's the picture of today when somebody wants to develop a blister. They heat this jar and put it on there and let it cool, and it sucks up, makes a blister, fills with fluid. All trying to balance fluids. And President Washington's funeral, guess what his last request was? To be left alone and die in peace. That's what medical practice was like in his day. Yes. This comes from Garrison Fiedling, A History of Medicine. It follows that under different aspects of space and time, the essential traits of folk medicine and ancient medicine have been alike in tendency, differing only in unimportant details. In the light of anthropology, this proposition may be taken as proved. Cuneiform, hieroglyphic, runic, birch bark, and palm leaf inscriptions all indicate that folk ways of early medicine, whether Akkadian, Scandinavian, Slavic, or Celtic, Roman or Polynesian, have been the same. In each case, affair of charms and spells, plant lore, and psychotherapy to stave off the effects of supernatural agencies. Wherever this frame of mind persists, there is no possibility of advancement for medicine. And there is a variety. And so they use these variety of things, all types of things for medical therapy. This would be like versus like, as you mentioned. Now back in Hippocrates' time, he had a better clue of things, and he saw that style of life had a lot to play with this. So he believed in exercise and rest, diet, and use of very few drugs in his therapy. Then we move on to Galen, 600 to 700 years later. Most influential medical writer of all time. His writings dominated the thought and practice for over 1600 years. He practiced at a medical school in the old town of Pergamus. Remember the Bible? One of the 7 churches? Pergamus. I had a chance to visit this ruins of this medical school. It was a great one. They had an amphitheater that seated 2,500 people. Their library was a contesting library to that of Alexandria. And when they were to get their writing paper, the papyrus, from Egypt, and Alexandria prevented them from getting more of the writing paper because they didn't want this Pergamus library to become greater than theirs. So they stopped giving them paper. And that's when parchment was invented, using animal skins to write on for them to be able to continue writing their books. So it was a very interesting medical school, and it was all dedicated to the serpents. Great use of medications, Galen. And here was a change where Hippocrates had seen a light that lifestyle had a part to play with illness. But Galen, he was throwing every sort of concoction imaginable at anything with no rhyme nor reason. His theriac had 70 substances. Eventually it grew to almost 200 substances in this universal antidote. It was being used up till the early 1800s. That was the medical thought of those days. Hippocrates, Galen believed the theory that the body was governed by these 4 different humors, or 4 different fluids. In Mrs. White's writing, she uses the word humor oftentimes. She had using what was commonly described at that day, and for years it didn't make a bit of sense to me. Why does this? What's a humor? Well, it's just fluid. Blood or sanguine, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile. That was the 4 fluids that needed to be balanced. Or if you had a personality, 4 different personalities. Again, this was the balancing. It carried on from the past. It was a balancing. The concept of disease and treatment, medieval medicine. All right, the bloodletting, the blistering, the emetics, the forced vomiting, purgatives to cleanse the bowels, expectorants to clear the lungs, diuretics to cause flow of urine. All of these things, as they found different substances that would promote those, then they would use them, but using them in a manner that the concept of disease was caused by the imbalance of these fluids. Therefore, they created problems more than anything else. And they also used astrology to make a diagnosis or to determine the style of treatment. Even to where to draw the blood from the body would be used in astrological divinations. Their apothecary at that time, apothecary, which would be the drugstore. Most commonly used substances were deadly poisons: mercury, lead, antimony, arsenic, strychnine, digitalis. That in small doses had a purpose, bigger doses killed you. Aconite, a very poisonous herb, even handling the roots can create a poisoning. Opium, nicotine, and many others were used. And there was a picture taken out of a medical history book, that's history in pictures. It says in this engraving, Death's Dance, the satirist suggests that medications prescribed by doctors belong in the category of killing substances. Oh, you can see these were the drugs, and when Mrs. White talked about drugs, she was talking of these substances. A medical student wrote to her, he was up in northern Michigan, Ann Arbor, wrote to her and he says, when you talk about drugs, what are you talking about? Are you talking about the substance that we students talk about as drugs? And he named them these substances looked at, and she says, your letter answers your question. Yes, the other substances were called simples and doubles. But she says, you know, in time you learn to be free of even those. So when you think about that word drugs being used in her writings, we're talking primarily of these. Dr. Harding, who was professor of pharmacology at the medical school, when he retired, Mervyn Harding, he wrote a book, and he did a special research to try to help on this dilemma of what's this drug business. And that I have that in my book and in his book about it, and it tells where selected messages, I think book 2, where this discourse between the medical student and Ellen White. It gives us a little better understanding when we use that word drug. Today the drug is used for any type of anything. She was referring to these very dangerous, very dominant ones, but overall to be free of all of them. But it'll help us avoid some of the conflict that occurs between people that you as a doctor, you use a drug. I have people come up and their teeth almost fall out. They're chatting at me so angry. I'm a doctor. I'm a medical doctor. You use that and yet you're presenting these subjects. I've really had some tough times. And this helps us understand that not everything in the world, because there are some pharmaceuticals that'll save your life. Absolutely. No question. And not bad to be taking. If you're going to have an operation, do you want to do it with no anesthesia?
No.
And they were doing anesthesia at her day, and she never says a word against it. They would take chloroform or ether and put people down to the unconscious next to death and bring them out, but no comments against it. So there is a time to use and a time not to. And so to use that word drug blatantly for everything, I think is misuse. The beginning of change. All right, there became in the country, you know, such bad practice of medicine that many people were trying to find a better way. In 1777, we covered the other day about how a ship at sea found water was helpful for people with typhus that were laying on deck. And water helped cool them. It was valuable. Samuel Thompson in New England had an approach, I think it was with using herbs, that was better than the present method. The basic thing these people trying to do a better method were doing is that they were not doing the bad things. And whatever they came as an alternative got the credit for things being better. And the alternative may have had nothing to do with the benefit. And this is very true on homeopathy. So we'll get to that here in a moment. So we're looking at these Samuel Hahnemann. That's the man that started homeopathy, 1796. And we'll come to that more specific, but I want to look at some more. During this period of time, these alternative therapies were coming in. And the homeopathy drugs diluted to extreme dilutions. And you're right on the dilutions. There's a little more to it. Vincent Princenet started the interest in hydrotherapy. He was a boy living over in Austria. Water cures. And then there was the eclectic doctors that used the same poisonous drugs that the regular doctors did, only minute doses. And Mrs. White was given a vision for that about the three types of practice: the regular MDs, the eclectic MDs, and the homeopathists. And none of them were God's way. The homeopathist was the least toxic. All right? So we proceed here. And the osteopath and chiropractic came along about that time too. But let's look at homeopathy. This man was a German living in Germany, and he didn't like the way that medical practice was with these toxic substances. And so he began to advocate some better methods. Samuel Mann, he began to have them clean up their homes, their clothing, their way of living, their diet. He actually was promoting basically what we do. But then he comes along with this another, he is also connected with this concept of the Eastern beliefs, of this great cosmic energy, and he's guided by that. And so he's looking for some sort of approach that uses that. So, and he one day took some of the bark that is used, quinine bark that is used for malaria. We now know it's for malaria and works. At that time they used it for everything. And he took it and he felt he had the same symptoms of malaria. He took it when he was well. So he felt, oh, and this cures malaria, so it must be taking, have a relationship here in this spirit world of the these great cosmic energy. So let's see what we say here. German physician who recognized the bad results of drug therapy as used in his day by medical doctors. He refrained from the drug use. He advocated public hygiene, good nutrition, fresh air, and exercise. He believed that the same substance causing symptoms in a healthy person would cure those symptoms in a sick person. Like cures like, in this manner that was mentioned over here. All right? We go on. But what was his worldview? He was a follower of the Spiritist and the medium Emanuel Swedenborg. Wow. And so everything he does, he's going to be applying in this concept that he has of the false story of creation and of this great power throughout the universe. He was an admirer of Paracelsus, who was a follower of these practices, and Mesmer too. He believed in vitalism. It's a synonym for chi or all these others. Now Mrs. White uses the word vital energy or vital. She's referring to the genetic power in our system. She's not referring to this power. She used essence and animal magnetism to refer to that particular power that we call the chi. And Hahnemann claimed to be inspired. And he took some of this bark, and that's when he thought he had a disease like the that the bark is used to cure an energy force that was believed to be found in the animate and inanimate substances, vitalism. So this energy that penetrates everything, the same thing that John Harvey Kellogg was promoting, the energy is believed could be harnessed and used so to affect the vital force and be manipulated by the individuals. An illness, of course, believed to be a disruption of the flow of this vital force. So homeopathy was claimed to be able to balance the energy and stimulate the self-healing. Here we have now this substance taken from plants, and let's learn a little more. Hahnemann's definition of disease, it had an untuned dynamic force. This energy we've been talking about all week, he says, is out of balance. That's simply by untuned dynamic force. That's what he's saying. And so he wants to tune it. And he feels he can tune it by using dilute substances, various substances. The correction of untuned dynamic force removes symptoms and in turn restores health. And how does he do that? Well, I'm going to move along here fast. I'm going to skip this section right here. He says if you take a substance and dilute it down and get till maybe you don't even have a molecule left of the original substance. You dilute it and then you give it to an individual, that'll cure their disease. What is it that cures it? It's the vital energy. It's the chi that comes down through it, and you are concentrating the chi. The vital substance or the plant that you started from or the mineral is gone, and what you have left supposedly in this dilution is nothing but the chi. And the chi is the healing part. This is tying in totally with this whole concept of the false story of creation and of salvation. Remember, we're contesting all the way through here God's plan of salvation, restoration, against the devil's deception. For his, it's the right arm of his message. And they said only one remedy was necessary if you could find that remedy, and they might use a pendulum to find which remedy you should use. Or a machine, radionics, or astrological signs, psychic revelations or seances to find which of the 2,000 different remedies that were available. Homeopathy, hypothesis, like cures like. Use the same drugs as other physicians, but they would dilute it to where there was nothing left or extremely small. Now, I was mentioning about allergies. Allergies, you do a desensitization for allergies with certain smaller doses, but this is far beyond that. This has been well proven is not in the same vein as developing the injections for allergies. This has to do with the chi, that spirit. It is claimed that healing properties are the essence. It's the essence, which is the chi, which is the 100 other synonyms for that, that is supposedly being diluted and sent along. So we come down to that, and I'm right at the time, 2 minutes past. I'm going to stop, but I'm going to open for questions. I've gone pretty fast to go through this. I'm sorry on that. But I wanted to have some time here. You can be dismissed, and it's not offensive to me if you want to leave. But for those that want to ask some questions, I'll be here for a bit, and we'll go. First question.
Okay. I was told by some friends when I just moved to Idaho that I'm from Jamaica, and Jamaica doesn't have boron. You know that on the periodic table, boron?
Yes, she's saying that Jamaica doesn't have boron. That's one of the elements of the...
And they told me that I needed it, so they told me about this soap detergent thing called borax. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Borax. Mm-hmm.
So they were telling me that I should drink that.
Yeah, this wouldn't fall into the category of the things we're discussing here.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's different. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
And is this the medical doctors?
No, friends.
Forget it. Okay. There is mineral deficiency and so forth. Before you get into some of those, they can be toxic and things. You get a qualified physician before you start doing that. Other question? Yes.
I think under Reiki you had put it's different than therapeutic touch.
Yes, the therapeutic touches and so forth, what's supposedly different. There really is no difference. Actually, there's not. But in the philosophy of permitting them, therapeutic touch, you're balancing energy. In the Reiki, you're simply infusing energy. That's the difference.
Oh.
All of them by the same power that does hypnosis. Yeah. Other questions? This is, yes, way in the back.
What about biofuel tuning?
A little louder.
Biofuel
Tuning,
tuning. Biofuel.
biofuel. Okay. there's hundreds of things out there, and I don't know about all of them, but there is a concept that you take a tuning fork and you use that on a person, and it balances the energy that's going up through between the chakras. This person's devised her own little therapy. They come out of, I don't know how they feel the rest of the people are going to believe what they're teaching, but each one out there seems to have their name on something or be known for doing something extra special. And so now you take a tuning fork and you get it going and you put it at certain places and let it vibrate, and it's supposed to move the energy between chakras better. I just had looked that up before I came. I hadn't heard of it before. So that was a new one. And the biofield is supposedly this aura that's around on that. And that may not be exactly the one you're referring to, but that's the one I do know about. There is no end of things. Anybody out there can divide a new one, and nobody counteracts it and says this is nonsense, and it becomes popular, and we pick up the name, and it's unbelievable how many people believe without checking out and having a background judgment on these things. One other question.
What about hyperbaric oxygen chambers?
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. That's shown to be valuable in some healing of wounds that are slow to heal. Hyperbaric is like if you got the bends from deep ski diving and you came up and they would put you in one of these chambers to keep pressure, so the oxygen, they're trying to put more oxygen in the body, and this has been ongoing for 30 or so years. It isn't widely used. If it was good for all things, every hospital and physical therapy department would have one. And so in the research of them, and doctor, you help me on this if you know things that I don't about it, but there are some doctors here and there that says if you get a stroke, you get here quick and we'll put you in them. If the science testing in the past years had shown that that was that much value, every hospital, every as I mentioned, physical therapy department would have one. But they have been shown to be beneficial for healing some wounds. I know, again, one of my family members that had one, and people come for these. It turned out, you know, you can do them without a license and so forth, so it becomes popular to be a healer. This drive to be a healer without knowledge and without training, without license, is overwhelming. And a lot of things are driven along by this concept, or this motivation in the background.
Isn't it true that too much oxygen is toxic?
Thank you. I was coming to that next, but I had forgotten it when you brought it up again. When I was a student, newborn babies no longer, in the last 1 or 2 years, they were no longer putting some of these preemies under oxygen. Why? When they put them under oxygen, they went blind. And so that, knowing that, has made me cautious about just jumping on the bandwagon and proclaiming the benefits of the oxygen hyperbaric. They're valuable, and there's a lot of research done, and most big cities will have one hospital or somebody there that's doing these. And doctors will send patients there for the wounds that don't heal, diabetic wounds and so forth, and they seem to help those. But I say, if the research had shown that they're really dramatically beneficial for a stroke or something, they would be everywhere. They're not that expensive to have. Yeah. You had another question.
Well, that made me think about some of Dr. Thrash's comments when she says that virtually all minerals, if taken in excess, are poisonous or toxic to the body.
Anything in excess, even water.
That's like the New Start, you know, that.
Yeah. So there's temperance in all things. Yes, you had a question. And then I'll get the one back here.
I wanted to ask you about colloidal silver.
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. It doesn't fit into our spiritualism, but I will take that one on. Silver was used a great deal in the past. Minute dilutions of it is a very good antiseptic and cheap. When I was in Thailand in Mission Hospital, we used it a lot for wounds of burns. We would put a wrapping around a burn and let a drip of silver nitrate, 1/10 of 1%, keep that dressing moist at all time. And this hospital it was a new hospital, and they had a terrazzo floor, which is a rock floor that's ground and smooth, and it was white terrazzo floor. This one guy that had his foot burned, it was all wrapped up in this bandage and this dripping of the silver nitrate, and he decided to get up and take a walk. You know what happens to silver nitrate when the sunshine hits it? Turns black. And all through that beautiful floor was these black footsteps, permanent. On there. Doctor, have you seen anybody that has taken the silver nitrate, and when they get, what is it? The word passed me. The condition they get, some of them get.
They change their skin color permanently.
Yes.
I've seen 1 or 2 people.
I've seen a couple. And once you've seen them, it cures you forever using it, right?
Except for burns. Like
Yes, it has an application, the proper thing, and it's not it could be toxic if you drink a lot of it and so forth, but by and large, even using it, let's say, as a poultice or in a irrigation in ear, you never know which person is going to get argyria. That's the word I was looking for. And their skin turns gunmetal gray. And I tell you, they look like death twice over. And they just become their social part of life is just overwhelming hindrance. And there are people out there selling it now for all sorts of cures, and it's a good substance, but they running the risk of any certain person getting it. You know what happens when you have a silverware? It turns black in time when the sun hits it, right? It oxidizes. And so this stuff gets in our system, gets in the skin, and there the sunlight hits it and it oxidizes, turns black, permanent. It doesn't go turd black, it gets to it looks worse than death, doesn't it? You only have to see one and you're cured, let me tell you. Yes.
What about taking fulvic and humic minerals?
Which type? Taking certain minerals?
You know, like fulvic and humic.
I'm not familiar with those because that's not a particular mineral itself. It may be a combination of some. There was a question way in the back I haven't got to. I want to get first. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if it relates, but with the homeopathy using a little bit of a poisonous substance I was wondering if that related at all to immunizations where you take
No.
a little
No.
bit of a...
No. No. Yeah, we spoke about that a bit ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is not, because in the immunizations you can measure in the bloodstream the response occurring in the certain of the proteins, and it takes a certain amount to do it. You get too small amount, you get no response. In this, the dilutions here are so much smaller, so much more dilute. It's like going over in Japan and putting a little bottle of some solution in the ocean and coming to the Pacific Ocean and dipping it out. That's what the dilution's like.
And then, can I ask another little bit of a question? Something about, have you heard of grounding?
Yes, on that part. All of the information I like to answer that. Grounding really has to do of balancing this mythical energy. Now, there is a grounding of your electrical forces. You all know about that. You and your battery have to have a ground and so forth, so the electricity flows through. But the grounding that you hear about mostly is supposedly to balance this mythical energy going through your system and going down into the earth. Remember we talked about the martial arts. If they balanced the martial arts just right, then they were grounded in such a way that nobody could tip them over. So where's the devil has again hijacked terms, things, moved in with his philosophy and made confusion. If you join our health and spirituality research network, if you join that, send your name and say, send me information on grounding, because recently we sent out, I had a physicist give us his information relevant to the earth and getting the things relevant to that. So it wasn't from mine, it was from a physicist. And if you do that, I'll send you the information we've already sent out. Yes?
Like we know, with every truth, there's a counterfeit.
Ah,
There is a truth grounding. There's a truth to a lot of this.
the
that
devil
is
hijacks them.
perverted. But our electrical flow is enhanced by walking around barefoot and reconnecting with the earth, because all of our shoes have rubber on the bottom, and it prevents our connection with what God intended us to do.
Yeah, I would recommend you send your name in to the Health and Research to join the network, and we had a nice presentation that we sent out on that I think answer all of those questions. Mm-hmm.
It's called the law of infinitesimals when it comes to homeopathy.
Yes. Uh-huh. Okay. I tried to cover too much material, I think, today, and it can leave for confusion. Yes, you had a question, one more.
Fulvic and humic minerals comes from, supposedly, from an ancient kelp beds that were from the flood, and they grind that up and they extract.
So it's a mixture of
I would
minerals.
think you could get the same thing from seawater.
Well, I think the Lord made it so we can get what we need out of the plants that grow on the ground too. And the seaweed is fine, but it would be a concentrated amount of them. You ask, is it okay? It would not be anything to do with spirituality, I think, on that score. But you'd have to be careful about getting too much concentrated anything. The great movement in nutrition today, and it's amazing. I get reports and books out of Tufts University School of Nutrition, and they're all teaching, take the food from the plants the way they're growing. Be careful about this refining. It sounds like our same mantra that we've been doing for years. And it's just beautiful to see it. The only other problem is they also are promoting alcohol, that's good for you, and a few other errors. But they have finally come around to even whole grain foods, whole grain cereals. And that's, for 15 years ago, they didn't do that. So today, the major science centers are saying, don't take vitamins, don't take all of these other things, because you get a better response when you take it the way it comes in nature. You see, to overdo something in our system, it creates a problem. And so I take a vitamin because I have an early macular degeneration, and they have shown that certain ones, we would probably not need to do that if we had enough greens every week. Those particular things are the ones that are found in the greens. And we as an Adventist are probably most in error in our diet, if anything, is not enough greens. That is one of the most powerful and best foods. And I know, the broccoli, the chard, the spinach, and those different things. And so that which they're giving for macular degeneration, and has been proven with long-term studies to really be of benefit to prevent and minimize the advancement of macular degeneration, is this substance that has these substances that would be gotten out of the greens.
And the deeper the greens, the better.
The deeper the greens, the better. Well, if you get the iceberg lettuce, the outer one's probably a little more concentrated with what you want. But the other part has good things too, but you want a variety of these things. Today, it is a wonderful time in the field of nutrition. This was my study for 50 years. That's all I studied, it seemed like. And this spiritualism is a last add-on interest. And it comes down, it's so simple. I don't need to know all that I learned. All you need is fruits, vegetables, grains, cereals, nuts, non-refined, and takes care of itself. Protein, forget about it, it takes care of itself on that part. And this, so forth. But anyway, thank you, you've been great. I hope what we've presented can be useful for you. I know this group is not tempted in this line, but you have friends, you have relatives, you have others that you can share with, and that part.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so let's have our prayer of dismissal. Our Father, we are grateful for the information you've allowed us to have and understand. May it be that we can utilize what we've learned here and be a benefit to others. This we ask for the blessings in that. In Jesus' name, amen. If you haven't got a book or a handout, come and get it. You're most welcome to that.